Those who have been to a ruined wedding, what happened? A co-worker was at one of his best friend's wedding. There were very specific rules about the food. No nuts. There were a couple people there, including the maid of honor, who were severely allergic. The venue served something that had nuts. Maid of honor went anaphylactic. EpiPen was not effective, and she died on the way to the hospital. Needless to say, there are lawsuits abound. I went to a wedding where the bride and groom bought the wedding package on Groupon. Which is fine. Why spend a fortune for one day? But I guess the venue thought they could cut some corners. So they stuck us in a room that smelled so strongly of cat urine some people immediately left. The only drinks were those from a vending machine. It was next to an airport, so every time a plane took off the ceremony had to be paused because you couldn't hear anything. And the day after the event, every single one of us had food poisoning. Maybe not ruined, but it definitely got tense. Started with the best man / groom's brother just absolutely roasting the bride and her parents. Basically called them gold diggers and stuff in front of several hundred family and friends. Then they cut the cake. Apparently, the groom was told under no uncertain terms not to shove cake in her face. Well, he did it anyway and she stormed off, not to be seen for 20 minutes. Reception went on as planned. She got wasted, and I'm told she passed out that night in the middle of the street while still in her wedding dress. Pure class. They're divorced now. Big wedding. Around 500 people. All the future wife's doing. She wanted the huge $70,000 wedding. I was a groomsman. Pre-wedding, he's nervous as hell. All these people, has to be perfect. This is her dream wedding. Yada yada. So, at some point the whiskey gets pulled out. It went from a calm the nerves few shots to he's just about finished the bottle. We give him water, get him in the shower, and redressed. It's go time. Midway through her vows it happens. He pukes all down the front of her dress. It was horrible, but it was great. They're going on 8 years strong. The bride's father was 45 minutes late to walk his daughter down the aisle. While we were waiting, the air conditioning broke in the venue. It was over 100 degrees outside and humid as fuck. The place was overcrowded. You could barely move without bumping into someone else, and in the heat, that was extra miserable. I guess the air conditioning problem had also affected the refrigeration or something, because most of the food was spoiled. The only food on the buffet was salad, spaghetti and rolls. Not enough to feed even half the guests. Most people left after the first dance. 2 of the bride's aunts fainted. The bride and the wedding planner were crying. The wedding was at a state park that's famous for its giant gorge / waterfall. I don't know whose idea this was, but someone suggested a photo overlooking this gorge and everybody was game. The wedding party went around a stone security barrier and the maid of honor literally fell off the cliff to her death. It was like 500 plus feet. I'm a wedding photographer. I was at one really fancy one a couple of years ago. Typical outdoor deal at a swanky location in the middle of nowhere. The place was really nice, had a large concrete stairway flanked by water fountains that led down to the altar area, so the bride could be seen by all, like she was ascending from heaven. The ceremony begins, and the bridal party come down and take their places. Then the bride appears with her father. She takes 3 or 4 steps down the concrete steps, and her shoe twists on her. She tumbled down a good 12 feet or more, and busted out the majority of her front teeth in the fall. So much blood all over her. With the place being so isolated, it took a good 40 minutes for ambulance to arrive, and she was in intense pain. Ultimately, she was okay, and I got an email from them weeks later with a rescheduled date. This time there was no stairs anywhere in sight. It was a big wedding, over 300 people. Turns out the bride had been having an affair with her cousin's husband. The cousin had known for a little bit, but waited until the wedding to go table to table letting everyone know the bride was sleeping with her husband. Poor groom was blindsided. Worst part was his father-in-law was well off and opened up a restaurant for him. Well, he lost his wife and his restaurant. A fight broke out between father of the bride, brother of the bride and some guy that just happened to be staying at the hotel. In reality I don't know how much of a fight it was, more just the dad and brother assaulting some man. So anyway, they were both arrested. Cut to the bride sobbing at breakfast because her dad and brother spent the evening of her wedding in jail and now face assault charges for what they did to this poor man. Was a guest of friend of the bride, did not know anyone attending. Very expensive, over the top place. Several hundred guests of this very Italian wedding. Maid of honor grabs the microphone at the cocktail hour and begins her speech, rambling, drunk. Quickly devolves to stating the recently deceased mother of the bride was against this wedding and that's basically what killed her. Plus Vinny will never give up prostitutes. She is tackled by several people and dragged away. The happy couple is separated and divorced within a year. During the mixed gender bachelor party, the bride-to-be got in a spat with the groom and slept with another guy. Wedding was off the next morning. They lost $10,000. He took her back a couple of months later. This was around 2009. On the second day of the wedding, the bride went swimming in the ocean. It took place in Tenerife. She swam out too far and was basically lost at sea for 9 hours or so. She eventually found her way back, but was in bad shape. Everyone was panicked the whole day and thought she drowned. By the time she got back, she wished she had. Her husband found her phone and read a bunch of messages supposedly from her aunt, but it was quickly clear from the sexy content it wasn't her aunt at all. She had been having an affair with the best man for apparently years. They got an annulment shortly after. About $60,000 down the drain. One of the most opulent weddings I've ever been to. The groom's father groped both the bride and his daughter, my then girlfriend, multiple times each. Ended up getting punched out by his son and locked in a minivan for a few hours until he sobered up. This was one I worked at. After the ceremony, right at the start of the reception, photographer was taking jumping photos of the bride and bridesmaids, so they were all jumping in the air while wearing heels. Bride landed and dislocated her knee, then passed out and kept going in and out of consciousness. We called an ambulance who turned up and fixed her knee, but she wanted to continue with the wedding. She then had the first course of the meal and threw up down her dress and had to sit with her mum in another room while everyone else danced. Felt so bad for her as she spent the rest of the evening crying. Best friend's mom got remarried and had an expensive, beautiful wedding, but for some reason didn't hire a DJ. Last minute her mom asked me to manage the CD and gave me a list along with verbal instructions of when to play each. I tried to warn her that I simply did not follow, but she told me she had confidence in me. Apparently all her life she wanted to walk down the aisle to some specific song, but I just couldn't figure it out. They had to get walking to match the sunset, so she went ahead down the aisle while I flipped through a series of incorrect songs to the horror/amusement of the crowd. 4 years after, when I called my friend's house and her stepdad answered, he'd say, "Is this the guy who fucked up my wedding? How are ya?" My own. It rained and was cold. No one bothered to turn the lights on, so the few pictures I have are dark and grainy. My parents divorced earlier that year, so my dad hated seeing my mom for the first time and didn't stick around to get a picture with me. My husband's mom didn't even take time off work to attend. Apparently the money was more important. Good news is that we just celebrated our 49th wedding anniversary. Thanks for watching the video. For more content like this, please subscribe, like, and share the video and push the notification button.